Well, Oklahoma entered this recession later than the rest of the country and looks to be recovering at a quicker rate, thanks in great part to our energy sector. Yet we're not an island unto ourselves. At this year's Economic Outlook Conference, I sat down with Chad Wilkerson, the Oklahoma City branch executive of the Federal Reserve Bank. So Chad, I've heard that this year's rebound described as more of a U-shaped recovery, something that's not like a V where it goes down then right back up, but maybe down and then kind of levels out on a downward path. You think that's a fair description of where we are?
I think it is definitely more of a U than a V. This was a very deep recession that we have gone through, and typically when you come out of a deep recession, it is a steep rebound as the economy recovers. The difference this time is that this was a full-blown financial crisis. There's a deleveraging that needs to occur. The economy is growing at about a 2.5% clip this year. It's expected to grow about that fast or perhaps slightly faster next year. That's really kind of the normal rate of growth of the economy. But the problem is we're coming out of such a deep gap, and so that's not fast enough to bring unemployment down quickly.
Are there any outside forces that could be affecting any of this?
One thing playing a bit, I think, into economic growth this year has been the European sovereign debt issue. It raised its head in the spring with Greece, has more recently with Ireland. There's not a huge direct effect on U.S. exports, for example, from that, but it is a bit of a concern in financial markets. We're not expecting it to be a crisis proportion, especially for the U.S. economy, but it's definitely something we're keeping our eye on.
Let me ask you about a couple of different areas that are definitely double-edged swords, and the first one being consumer debt versus consumer spending.
Yes, we approached historically high levels of consumer debt during the decade of the 2000s, and that has started to come back down since the crisis, but it still remains historically high. Now, it's a positive thing that it has started to come back down. Savings rates are back up. That's a good thing for the individuals. It's a good thing for the country in the long run. The only potential problem is if debt reduction occurs too fast, that cuts into consumer spending in the short run. And so the economy doesn't grow as fast as it otherwise would coming out of a deep recession. That's part of what we're seeing right now.
And consumers have been historically, or maybe not historically, just very tenuous, have they not?
Not in the decade of the 2000s.
No, but after the recovery. I mean, during this recovery, it seems as consumers are being a little tenuous about spending.
Definitely there is some caution. Consumer confidence has improved slightly in recent months, but still remains low by historical standards. There's still just a lot of uncertainty about jobs, about the strength of the economy, about a number of political issues. So there is a good amount of caution as well. And that's filters into higher savings rates. People are concerned about their future personal money supply, and so are hanging on to a bit more dollars than they otherwise might.
Mm-hmm. Now, one other area that I think people have described as a double-edged sword are the tax cuts that will be implemented, and where they may hold some short-term relief, they may also hold some long-term problems.
Right, that's always the issue with fiscal actions. There is the discussion right now about whether to extend the Bush tax cuts. It appears a deal might have been reached on that. Certainly, keeping tax rates low in the depths of a recession will keep growth stronger than it otherwise will be. The offsetting factor to that is the lost revenue from tax cuts down the road will have to be supported sometime in the future by either tax increases or spending cuts. And so I think personally there always needs to be, whenever there is a tax cut, a plan in the future for how that will be paid for down the road. Otherwise, our government debt will just continue to grow.
Now, you have done some research on past recessions. Are we maintaining to that historical perspective?
Oklahoma is actually performing at about their average path in this recession and recovery period. We typically enter recessions 2 to 3 quarters after the nation. Energy prices are high at the beginning of a recession. That benefits us. Then we fall in, and we on average recover at about the same time as the nation. And so our recessions are typically 2 to 3 quarters shorter, and that's exactly what appears to be happening this time. We started recovering in the middle to late part of last year, and actually our recovery path so far this year has been slightly stronger than the nation, and it is fairly typical for Oklahoma. Now, there's a huge exception to Oklahoma's normal recession recovery path. In the 1980s, of course, we didn't rebound with the nation, and that was because energy prices didn't rebound as the nation rebounded, and so we suffered for a good 5 to 10 years longer than the nation in that case. And that's always our biggest risk, is that energy prices don't rebound after a recession. But oil prices have risen quite a bit the last year and a half. Natural gas prices remain somewhat low. They've increased a bit the last few days, but that remains the risk for us always.
Are there any other sectors in addition to energy that you would follow to predict any type of recovery for Oklahoma?
The most cyclical industry typically tends to be manufacturing. Manufacturers make products for virtually all other industries. So we track that closely at the Oklahoma City branch. As you know, we do a monthly survey of conditions in our district, and our latest survey actually showed a fairly sizable increase in manufacturing activity in our 7-state region that includes Oklahoma. So we saw that as a positive sign that the recovery is indeed continuing. We're less worried about, I think, a double dip than we were perhaps earlier in the year. I'm not sure we were ever overly concerned about it, but we're seeing some better positive signs in some of the numbers there.
If you could write a newspaper headline, would it be cautiously optimistic?
I think that's a pretty good description, actually, of the outlook particularly for Oklahoma. I think that's the outlook for the nation, and I think Oklahoma's outlook is probably slightly better than that. So I would say at least cautiously optimistic.
All right. Thank you so much, Chad.
Thanks.